Hi there. Welcome to The PrevenTable, the podcast giving you a seat at the table with conversations about the intersection of alcohol, drugs, and mental health in everyday lives. Take a seat and join us.
Welcome to The PrevenTable.
Hi, well, thanks for having me.
And here with me today is Elizabeth. And Elizabeth is the executive director of KUTO, K-U-T-O, which stands for Kids Under 21.
Yep.
We have known each other, well, we've worked alongside each other for, probably close to 15 years when we added up.
We were neighbors from the very beginning.
Yes.
And so from you were my front door neighbor and I was your back door neighbor.
It's true.
Right there in Brentwood.
It's true.
We've been in that space in Brentwood for 26 years.
Wow.
So
how long have you been with KUTO?
I've been with KUTO since the late 1980s,
okay.
mid-1990s, so a very long time. I actually was part of moving the agency to the location that we have there in Brentwood. We had been in some shared space with one of our board members. And, at some point you just have to say, we're either going to do this like grown-ups. Right?
Wait, what does it mean to be a grown-up?
I don't know. I'm kind of not there yet myself. But, really sort of take it legitimately.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of just being, a nonprofit that was operating on donated everything, you eventually have to sort of take that step of, we're going to really try to make a place for ourselves in the community, be a destination place. We also have a telephone hotline that we train volunteers, and that's where the hotline's housed as well. So we needed a space that would work not only as an office and a gathering place, but also that we could house our hotline at.
Well, and so so now I'm going to date myself. So that's when I first heard of KUTO, was in high school. I had several friends who would volunteer and human your hotline. Mm-hmm. And in case people are not familiar, tell folks a little bit about what your organization's mission is.
Sure. Our mission, KUTO Kids Under 21, is to support young people who are in crisis. And that crisis can be having a bad day all the way up to having feelings of not wanting to live anymore. So we sort of circle our programs around crisis intervention and suicide prevention. And suicide is kind of a hot button right now. Actually, this month, the month of September, is Suicide Prevention Month. This is actually the Suicide Prevention Week. Friday is going to be Suicide Prevention Day.
It's almost like we planned your visit accordingly.
Do you think that happened?
Weird. It's like, yep, exactly.
But so all of our work is in that sort of realm of crisis and helping kids around crisis. We were founded by friends and family of a young man that died by suicide. And so, given that was 25 plus years ago, and we're still having these conversations around how can we help kids feel more connected, more valuable, more validated, more contributors to our community and society at large, we need to start doing a better job of helping kids find ways to help themselves through difficult times. And that's Kids Under 21's tagline, teens helping teens help themselves. And we were one of the first agencies that really picked up the topic of suicide. It was really taboo for such a long time.
Right.
Just as addiction and substance misuse has been for such a long time. And I think it's a little interesting that the field of suicide has kind of followed the developments of addiction and substance use and abuse, because we know that it's not it's not a fault that needs to be fixed.
Right.
That it's related to what's going on in the environment, situations, relationships, and thoughts or feelings of suicide is very much the same as substance use. You're trying to push down pain.
Yes.
You're trying to escape feelings that are so burdensome and so overwhelming and so filled with despair that there seems to be no hope other than this behavior which will make things go away or get better. So I think that there's a real strong connection between suicide prevention and addiction and substance use. So we just really feel strongly that the more skills that you can give students sooner than later, the better prepared they're going to be to make good choices, to have good coping strategies, to feel good about themselves. When I first got involved with kids under 21, we were working really just with high school students and predominantly 11th and 12th graders.
That's the friends that I had in high school. That's when they started kind of humaning the hotline.
Yeah. And so it was sort of like, you know, there's an old parable of somebody that goes to the river and they see people floating down the river.
The fence or the ambulance.
And they're like, why are these people in the river? Let's start pulling them out instead of walking up the shores to figure out why they're getting in the river in the first place.
Exactly.
And so the telephone hotline was one of the first things that we started doing.
Because we know peers.
They listen
to each other. Right.
And they're more reliable resources. The perception is they're more reliable resources. And we really, at Kids Under 21, felt like, well, if we're going to allow and honor kids, helping kids, we need to give them good information. We need to make sure that they have the right knowledge and that they have the right ability to be persuasive and helpful and supportive. That's sort of where the hotline came in, and we were really lucky. We got connected with Life Crisis Services, which is now transformed into Provident Behavioral Health, one of the oldest telephone hotlines in the United States.
It's really a pillar. Provident is a pillar.
They are huge in the community, and they're so well respected across the United States. And we got in with them, and we saw the success that they were having with their hotline, and we're like, we think kids can do this too. And of course, there was that, well, you know, how can you trust kids to do things like this? And
would you be like traumatizing those kids who are serving as the peer helpers? How are you going to monitor that? All of that, right?
Yeah, that same, you've had the same conversation because you work with kids too. And what we kept saying was, no, if you give them the training and you give them the opportunity to use the training, they will flourish. And so that's what happened for us. The hotline was really the first thing that we launched. When I became involved with the organization, that's when we really started broadening out into the community at large and doing school-based work.
Right.
Sort of, you know, trying to figure out, I always like to say I'm trying to put myself out of a job.
Oh my gosh, are we the same person? Because that is literally what I say. Like when I used to go into the classroom, I would say, please, I really want to retire early. Like if we could just figure out some maybe healthier ways to cope as a society, I would be retired very early. I mean, I feel like I look very good with a suntan. I would be great on a beach somewhere. So what does success look like for you? I mean, I think it would be easy to say, you know, that suicide rates in the state of Missouri and in your target area are 0. Well, I don't know that that's realistic. So what does success look like for you personally, Elizabeth? That's
a great question and a good idea too, because I think that your notion of 0 is something that should be attainable. In fact, there is an initiative called Zero Suicide. We can just bounce off each other, right? I start something and you finish it. But Zero Suicide is an initiative to really make systemic changes to help people sooner than later.
It's all about prevention.
It's all about prevention. And most they're in most hospital systems is sort of where Zero Suicide first kicked off. So hospital systems aren't historically preventative. They're, you know, interventions. They treat. So it's really an innovative approach to add that element to it. But success for us is, that's a great question. Success for us, honestly, is when we don't have kids calling our hotline.
Exactly.
When I'm handing out telephone hotline cards, 40,000 at a time, and I know that kids have these in their hands and they're not calling us.
And you do your best work when nothing happens, right?
Yes.
That's exactly with us as well.
Well, that's the difficult part of measuring prevention, because the whole key is 0, right? You don't want it to happen. We don't want those calls. What we do find, though, is that the calls that we get are high priority. They're kids that have tried to get help. They have done what they can to help themselves, or they've gone to their friends to get help, and I don't want to say we're their last ditch, but they know that we're a place that they can come to help them brainstorm, to help them figure out what is doable for them in that moment.
So we had some teens on. I want to like really I have two questions that are specifically related to teenagers. So one is around this idea of performative activism. We had 2 teens on, and I've heard from several others that are really struggling with teens going on TikTok or going on Instagram and making these outward asks for assistance, but then maybe not actually following up for help, or they'll say, well, why will you go on TikTok and ask for help and show yourself crying, but when I reach out to you, you're not opening up to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's very easy to just say, oh, they're being performative, right? And when I was in high school, we had several of my classmates who attempted suicide, and people would shrug it off and say, well, they're just crying for attention.
Mm-hmm.
And that has to be something that really gets under your skin.
It does. Because I believe that whatever behavior somebody engages in that draws attention to them, there's a reason that they need that attention. And I think that there needs to be, there's a fine line between attention and intention.
Oh,
and when we're talking about suicide, you really want to look at what is the intent of the behavior. Is the intent to draw attention to yourself by way of your emotional distress? Or is the intent to find a way to escape a circumstance and situation that you feel is uncontrollable and that you are inconsolable by that situation?
Mm-hmm. And you've tried other things, and it doesn't seem to be working. And that's when you find that teens are really reaching out to you all.
Yes. And I also feel that there is... there's still, I don't like to use the word stigma because I think that it just gets thrown around, because stigma is really fear and discrimination.
It's discrimination. That's what it is.
People are afraid to ask for help because they're afraid they're going to be discriminated against. So to your TikTok story, I think that there's so much attention that people get from TikTok, from putting themselves out there, and they're perceived as, oh, you're so brave for being so vulnerable and putting yourself out there. But then when you don't follow up on the help giving or on the resources, it makes people question, really, what are your motives here? Are your motives to bring people to your TikTok station?
Right.
Or is your motive to try to get help? And so it's that intent piece. What's the intent of the behavior?
So you mentioned motives, and I am a firm believer in the power of young people. And I also believe that young people have a great, I think I can say it because we're on a podcast, a great BS meter.
Oh, God, yeah.
Right? They can tell from a mile away if your intentions are good, if you're genuine, if you're here for them, or if you're just tokenizing them as a young person. You deal with young people all the time. How do you make sure that you are showing up in a way that is received by the young people and not as a means to an end? They're not a means to an end for you. They are the means, and they are the end. Right?
So I think the best thing that I can do in that capacity, Nicole, is to just be respectful. I mean, when I go into a classroom to talk to students, the first thing that I say to them is, I'm not going to be telling you anything you haven't heard before. And I think that you probably know this information already. I just want to make sure that you are comfortable with it and that you recognize the power that you have to help other people. And that kind of is an icebreaker right there, just letting them know that, hey, I'm not the talking head that knows everything, that's going to blah, 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 like Charlie Brown's teacher at you. And I seem to get a good deal of respect from students. There's always going to be those students that act up or ask inappropriate questions or don't take it seriously. And, the reality is that's probably the kids that are struggling, and that's just their way of asking for help.
That's their coping. That's how they're getting attention.
Exactly.
And the intention. I love that.
Yeah, exactly. So, I just try to be really genuine, really connect with them on this. I'm here to help you feel more comfortable. I'm here to reduce the fears that you might have, to answer any questions that you might have. And it seems to be really well received. I think that, and I have always felt this, that teenagers are just an untapped pot of gold.
Totally.
That if we give them the respect and show honor to them, to what they have experienced and also what they haven't experienced yet, I think it can go really far. Now, I will footnote that by saying you couldn't pay me enough money to be a teenager in 2021.
Never.
Because the things that teenagers are coping and managing at this point in time are so very different than what you and I, had to try to navigate.
Absolutely.
And I think that one of the things that is kind of the most heartbreaking about adolescent suicide is, with all of the resources that we have, how many young people and their families or parents or caregivers are not aware of those resources or are unwilling to take advantage of those resources. And maybe because I've been in this field for such a long time and I know so many different people across the field, we are a resource-rich community. We are just really poorly connected. And the more that I can play a role as a link of pulling people together and sharing that information back out, I think that that's a success for me. The other piece is just recognizing that it really goes against human nature to ask for help.
Yes.
We're not socialized to do that.
Yes.
And so
and not just to ask for help, but to actually receive it.
Mm-hmm.
And help and support our gifts. And not
Right.
everyone is good at receiving the gift of help.
Because it's not framed as a gift. It's framed as, here, this will fix you.
Right.
And I think if we sort of move away from, and this is the whole trauma-informed thing.
Yes.
If we move away from what's wrong with you to what happened to you, that makes it a totally different conversation.
Totally
And
different.
people are much more willing to bite on that little piece of that invitation that you're offering them. What happened to you? Tell me more about what happened. Making it about you, that person, versus making it about, well, your behavior is bad, or you're flunking out of school, or, whatever litany of things might be going on in a young person's life. So I think that that's a success too, if we're able to help kids, move just a little bit on the willingness to seek help scale, I think is huge. And a lot of that, I think, is coming from adults being more open to asking for help.
That's
and
right.
seeing how it can be helpful and successful for them.
That's right.
And not just using counseling or therapy as a, the glamorous thing that it used to be perceived of as, I'm in therapy and I'm going to be better now, versus
it's going to fix it. It's a Band-Aid.
Mm-hmm.
So I inherited a 5-year-old over COVID, and kind of like my stepdaughter. And last night I had a counseling appointment. And beautiful thing about COVID is that now I can really access telehealth
Mm-hmm.
counseling, from anywhere.
Right.
So I, after we eat dinner, cereal, by the way, it's really, really,
hey, cereal's for dinner
really,
too.
I'm really adulting.
There's no clock on a cereal box.
Right. So I'm role modeling really well. But so we have cereal for dinner, and then I said, okay, I would like you to go hang out. I'm gonna go upstairs and I'm gonna talk to my counselor. And I'm not claiming that I'm doing everything right, by the way. But she goes, oh, hope you have a good time. Like, it wasn't hope you feel better,
Mm-hmm.
hope you it's like she knows that it's a preventative thing.
Mhm.
Just like, I take vitamins,
Yep.
and like that it is one thing. And when I came downstairs, she was like, how was she? Did you guys have fun? It's like,
well, it's
yeah.
vitamins for your brain,
That's
right?
exactly right. She calls it my head doctor. I'm like, yeah, basically it is my head doctor.
Right. It's whatever.
But
It's
you have to
whatever you can
normalize
do.
asking for support, and that is something. It's a muscle, though. Like it requires
Practice.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, you have to practice that, and so I think that's one of the things that KUTO tries to do, is to give these opportunities for kids to practice these skills at different points in their
Yes.
academic career. So, in 5th grade, we're going to talk about how can we be hopeful, and how can we connect with help, and how can we identify trusted adults. And in 7th grade, we're going to talk about mental health and emotional wellness, and stress, anxiety, and depression are okay things. Everybody has
Yes.
them. How can we help ourselves stay healthy? And in 7th grade, we're going to layer in, more unhealthy coping strategies. Not negative. We don't ever say that. Unhealthy.
Nope. Not negative, not bad, or, or
It's
wrong.
just unhealthy.
Unhealthy.
And, regardless of the age of the student, Nicole, anytime we bring up, so give us a couple of examples of an unhealthy coping strategy, suicide comes up right away.
Yep.
It's not something that kids have never heard about.
Correct.
Or don't
and
talk
when
about.
you talk about it, you're not putting thoughts into their brain. They're already hearing about it.
We're just addressing it as an honest, serious, genuine situation that we know can be prevented, and we want to help you stay safe. We're just all about staying safe.
Elizabeth, if teenagers want to get involved, if caregivers want to find out how they can support their young people, if people just want to learn more, how do they find you? Where do they go?
So this is super simple. Go to our website, and it's kuto.org. I don't think it gets any simpler than
That's
that.
pretty darn simple. That's like the easy button right there.
Yeah, so from our website, there is information on the programs that we do. There's information on how to volunteer. There's information on mental health and emotional wellness. There's links to all sorts of different resources that are available. And, www.kuto.org. Go check it out.
Thank you, Elizabeth, so much for joining.
Thank you. This was fun.
It was really fun. And I would like to have you back to talk about teen mental health first aid, which is a related but different topic that I think, I think if it were up to us, we would want it in every single high school in the country.
Yeah, everybody.
Yeah.
Just like you have to take a health class, you need to take mental health first aid as well. So.
That's exactly right. So you're officially invited back.
Okay.
And if you like more of, if you want more of Elizabeth, if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe, like us, comment us, and join us next time. Thank you so much. Thanks, Elizabeth.
You bet. Thank you, Nicole.
Thanks for joining us at The PrevenTable, brought to you ad-free by Prevent+Ed. Prevent+Ed works to reduce or prevent the harms of alcohol and other drug use through education, intervention, and advocacy. Please visit their website at PreventEd.org. Like what you heard? Rate, review, and subscribe to stay up to date with what we are serving on The PrevenTable.